Dearest brothers and sisters, may God give you peace. I am Father Ibrahim Alsabaugh, a Franciscan friar, who was sent in 2014 to Aleppo in the middle of the disorder of the war, as a head of the Latin community of the city and as an Episcopal vicar. I thank the New York Encounter for inviting me to be here and to make this year's introductory speech. Although it is impossible to be physically present with you today, thanks to efficient communication means, I can be with you through this intervention. I do so in order to share the sufferings and hope of my people and of our Franciscan friars operating in Aleppo. This speech is composed of 3 parts. The first is titled Aleppo's Reality. It is a description of our people's situation, the bad lives conditions, and the negative results of their daily living. The second part is entitled Something to Start From. After taking my point of departure from Holy Scriptures, I will arrive to testimony about God's tenderness manifested through our Franciscan mission in Aleppo. The third part, entitled God is faithful to his covenant, remembers that God is faithful and he is always with us through many brothers and sisters who are helping us. He will not abandon us at all. A brief conclusion will leave to you a message of hope and encouragement. Aleppo's reality, the general situation of the Syrian country. At first glance, based on international news reports, it may appear to you that the situation in Syria is getting better. In fact, 2 months ago, we were all optimistic. In Aleppo, for instance, missiles are not longer hitting the houses, and the countryside of Damascus, with all the southern Syrian borders, is now secure in a Russian-Israeli agreement. Even the government has arrived to an agreement announcing the federal status by accepting the partial independence of the Kurds on the eastern part of the Euphrates. This supports the idea that Syria is heading toward a federal state, which is reassuring. In reality, however, the situation is still very critical. 3 neighborhoods in Aleppo are still getting bombarded by the armed groups, resupplied with potent military weapons and located on the western side of Aleppo and all the way to Idlib. From the western side of Aleppo, daily we hear about many casualties, both dead and wounded, because the ongoing battle. On the other hand, according to the Apostolic Nuncio of Syria, there are 10 countries with a military presence in Syrian territory. The news media reports a difficult situation, which Pope Francis described years ago as a Third World War torn in pieces in the Middle East. Every day, there are many dead and injured civilians and soldiers in all areas of the country. What I just stated represents clearly and forcefully what I want to say, that the situation in Syria is unstable for our future. Our future, in fact, is unclear. On the military level, as on the political one, we feel as individuals and as people of the country like a football being thrown between numerous players on the international level. Every Syrian feels like he is hanging in a void without the possibility of comprehending what is happening or where the events are going to next. A foreign political official confirmed that point and answered my question about the situation in Syria, saying, "The Syrian crisis is considerably worse than what happened in Iraq. While in Iraq a solution could be found, in Syria instead it could not. In Syria, the situation is much more complicated than any other area in the world, and the situation is just and definitely hanging there without any solution. The ruined city of Aleppo. In Aleppo, we look around and see only a destroyed city. The amount of destruction might be over 70% of its surface and surrounding countryside. Services like drinking water and draining channels are unavailable in many neighborhoods. Electrical power makes the city look like a Christmas tree. Electricity comes to the houses for a few hours, then everything goes dark for many more. I remember during my visit to Varsavia in Poland, the city destroyed during the World War, how the Polish people themselves were telling me that after the destruction of their city, they began the reconstruction. But even now, they haven't finished this process. As we know, it is so easy to destroy, but it is so difficult to rebuild. Even if the war were finished today, we will need many years to rebuild the city and the country. The economical situation and the unemployment. From an economics standpoint, Aleppo was once comparable in its economic production to Milano in Italy. Some 60% of Syrian national production came from Aleppo. Now it is today an entirely consuming city without any productivity. It is a city with a broken wing, a city that is unable to get up and get back on the track of economic progress. What distinguishes Aleppo from other Syrian cities is that while commercial activity has remained constant in Damascus and also in Latakia during the war, commercial movement has stopped in Aleppo. Even now, as a result of the airport being closed and the impossibility of opening the main highway that connects the city with the other Syrian cities, we don't know if Aleppo will get back to its previous state or if it will continue to remain blocked. This painful reality means our unemployment rate is over 70%. Subsequently, we have a poverty rate hitting over 80% of our families, with many barely able to afford their daily bread. The medical services situation. In addition to all these needs, there is no medical infrastructure to cover the needs of a larger number of sick people. There are no efficient medical insurance coverages. We are lacking highly qualified doctors to cover all specialties. There is also a shortage of equipment in many hospitals, with only a few in service and many more destroyed or out of service. Who is going to take care of the sick person while all of Aleppo's citizens are sick? Who will help pay for expensive surgical intervention or a doctor visit, or the prescribed medication in order to save lives? This is one of the most important challenges we face on a daily basis. With this emergency, we have hit the bottom of human poverty, or better, human misery. Being a minority, the existential crisis. For the ethnic and religious minorities, including Christians, things are even harder. During this crisis, minority peoples have suffered more than the rest and are still suffering. Moreover, the darkness of fundamentalism has spread its blackness over all areas of life. While the shells were falling over all the population of Aleppo, Christians had the largest share, especially during the periods of their annual holidays and religious feasts. Missiles from all directions were falling on the Christian neighborhoods. Moreover, the time of chaos is the time when the minorities pay more than the others, especially when a minority decides not to take up arms in order to stay as a bridge and an instrument of peace among the parties. Subsequently, in this time of chaos, the minority answer is a negative one: to run away, to immigrate. As a Christian community, from the beginning of the crisis till now, we have lost 2/3 of our families. Although the missiles have stopped falling on us in Aleppo, we know for certain that immigration still continues. Unfortunately, this long hemorrhage of immigration, still very active, is taking the majority of our vanguard, especially our youth, who are our future. The primary reason for immigration, more than all the circumstances that we amply described, is the feeling of insecurity in the wounded hearts of all the community. The fundamentalism, once hidden in institutions, now shows its soft manifestations, dropping out shadows on those who have remained in the city. Moreover, in the thoughts of all Christians, it is evident that the crisis will not have an end, that even were it to finish, it could be repeated in any moment and in the same way. Actually, the crisis, it just began. The crisis in Syria is not finished. Furthermore, we say it has just begun. We say today the marks we see today, the marks of the rigorous past 8 years, which have left deep wounds in the body, soul and spirit of every Syrian. The negative effects on the daily life of every person and family can be seen today on the faces, in the reactions and relationships, on all the different dimensions of daily life. I would like to give you 3 examples of these negative effects on the people and on life's conditions. Unbalanced society, lack of youth. During the Christmas feasts, especially while celebrating the midnight Mass of the Nativity in our church dedicated to St. Francis, I saw a lot of elders and a lot of children, but I didn't see the youth. Generations of young boys had escaped from the country or died or were caught up in the obligatory army service. For every young boy who still lives in Aleppo, there are 12 young girls. Our society is an unbalanced one. Conditions of life, winters cold without heating. Aleppo is infamous because of its cold winter, especially in January and February. Once more, we are suffering from this cold. Only one line from the 3 electrical lines arrived to the city, and this one line is so weak. More than that, the unstable power supply causing incredible damage to household electronics, and people do not even have the resources to repair any damage in their houses. Additionally, this January, we had a real crisis of gas cylinders. These are the cylinders we use for heating and for cooking, but they were in short supply. Wounded children, the psychological disturbance. The third point is about our children. 2 professors in one of our Catholic schools in Aleppo came to visit me and tell me that the children in the classes have changed a lot. One of them told me that after years of wars, these children saw resistance to the educational process, always distracted, with a lot of difficulty in concentration. They always show violence from all kinds in their relationships. All of them, she continued, manifest signs of psychological wounds deeper than we could imagine. What is making the situation more dramatic is the lack, if not the absence, of the specialized psychologists in the city. All these things we now consider to be normal in front of what we have survived during the past period before 2017, before the ceasefire agreement, when we lived in hunger, thirst and terror. Even if I continue hours and hours describing the difficulties, the sufferings and the terror that all of us citizens of Aleppo experienced, everything will be only a test, an introduction to the reality. Our suffering till now is indescribable. Something to start from, the covenant. On the other hand, from the story of Abraham, we know that for God, in the story of salvation, the something to start from was the heart of a man, a simple one, who knew how to love God, manifesting his love by being at his disposal, ready to put his hand in God's hand, following him with faith. In Genesis 12, we read, "Leave your country, your kindred, and your father's house for a country which I shall show you." On the one hand, we ask for something to start from. On the other hand, God himself, who is asking something from man, in order to continue his work of creation and salvation in the world. I would like to continue speaking about Abrahamic sacrifice. When Abraham and his son Isaac arrived at the place which God has indicated to him, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood. Then he bound his son and put him on the altar on top of the wood. Genesis 22. It was a simple one, built from few stones, and on its top some pieces of wood. But the sacrifice of Abraham was not so simple. It was his entire life, his son, his only son, his beloved Isaac. Genesis 22. To tell the truth, this altar was Abraham's heart, was the sacrifice, not then his life, his future, and all what he had. There is another story where we also hear about another altar. It is the one built by Elijah on Mount Carmel in the book of Kings, 1 Kings. We read about a big sin of all the nation because of Ahab, who deserted Yahweh and followed Baal. In that moment of Israel's history, all the people hobbled first on one leg, then on the other. So Elijah challenged the Baal prophets in front of the altar. Despite their prayers, with all their crying, shouting, dancing and calling, Baal didn't answer them. Elijah instead, who was the last left as a prophet of Yahweh, in front of hundreds of Baal prophets, repaired Yahweh's altar, which had been torn down, taking 12 stones, arranged the wood, dismembered the bull, and laid it on the wood, and built an altar in the name of Yahweh. After he prayed, a miracle happened, and God answered with a fire that fell, consuming the burnt offering and the wood, and licked up the water in the trench. These two examples about an altar symbolize the heart of a human being, the place where man can welcome or reject God's project in his life. How beautiful when man accepts God's call and puts on his altar the sacrifice of himself. How beautiful it is to see the covenant between God and man established. Because of it, God will bring salvation to all human beings. This simplicity and depth, this mutual relationship, or better, partnership, are the essential elements to build the covenant between God and man. These things always astonished and still astonishing me. God is procuring something to start from to man, but at the same time, he is waiting for something from man to tighten the covenant. This participation of man is called faith, with its results, trust and surrender. It is called faith, and its main consequence is obedience, or better, being at the disposal of God. Imagine that according to our Christian belief, God didn't give only something to man, but someone to start from, and that this someone is his Son, his only Son, his beloved Jesus. Everything became possible because a child was born for us, because someone gave us his life with the resurrection. So we could not be afraid to start from nothing, from the underground of the grave. With the incarnation and with the resurrection, we know that God is always, by his free initiative of love, giving us someone to start from, the gift from heaven, the Emmanuel, God with us. He is present with us through the strength of his resurrection, with the promise not to leave us orphans. It is important to remember that this someone whom we believe in, the strength of his resurrection, is not only acting in us Christians, but is acting in all persons of goodwill, who try with the sense of beauty and of good to help the others, especially those who suffer. Someone to start from in Aleppo. Here I am. When my superior asked me if I was ready to go and serve in Aleppo, I could not imagine what could be waiting for me. I am a Syrian born in Damascus, but I knew nothing about Aleppo. Until 2014, I served throughout the Middle East, but never in Syria. For more, Aleppo was what I heard from the news, like the castle of the Adams family, drowning in dark clouds between the rain and the hurricanes, full of ghosts. I was able to simply refuse to go because of the danger of death. Nobody could force me to go or blame me if I didn't. What drove me to accept without hesitation was what my superior said. While he was asking me if I were available to go, he said, "Aleppo is in need. People are in need." So I answered him, inspired by the Holy Spirit, "I am ready to go." That's why I have entered to the convent, not to collect diplomas, as I had been studying in Rome, but to give my life for the people through my pastoral service. Can a person begin from nothing? When I arrived to Aleppo, I came to see the complete disorder, the chaos. The image we find in the first words of the Bible could explain the situation I found there. The earth was a formless void. There was darkness over the deep. For hundreds of kilometers on the road of Aleppo, I saw only destruction, destroyed buildings and roads, ruins without any sign of life. When I arrived at the convent for the first day, people were continually knocking on the door, desperately asking for water. There was no running water in the houses for years and years. After days of living in Aleppo, I understood the depth of the people's suffering with the lack of alimentary productions, the absence of medicines, the scarcity of surgeons, destroyed hospitals, and missiles falling day and night on their houses, schools, hospitals, churches, and mosques. Everything was and continues to push any normal human being to desperation. I came with my naked hands, without any type of scientific preparation, to face the emergency situation. Only a small amount of money was left to me as a guardian from the ex-superior of the convent. This money is for the poor, he said. So I began to open a new road in the desert with my own fingers. We commenced with the distribution of water from the convent's well, and after that the distribution of alimentary boxes to hundreds of families to cover their sanitary needs, from medicines to expensive surgical interventions. With faith, I came with naked hands, but I was armed with faith, faith that the divine wind that was sweeping over the water in the beginning of the world was still sweeping today over Aleppo. I went to Aleppo with faith. I was certain that God's grace would give me something to start from. Everything was confirmed as I began to see the wonderful work that God can do. I went to Aleppo carrying with me only my trust and surrender to God. I went carrying my limited love toward Him and towards His people, and with my thirst to serve Him through every person in need. In fact, I am certain that charity is something that springs from an open heart, which leads one to make things he or she has never conceived of. This is how all the miracles I have witnessed in my 4 years in Aleppo have come about. God's answer, our Franciscan mission in Aleppo, in the most wounded place in the world. Under all these circumstances, as a Franciscan from the custody of the Holy Land, who celebrated last year the anniversary of 800 years of the Franciscan presence in the Middle East, I try to continue our mission in Syria, especially in Aleppo. I carry with me all the friars who have lived and gave their lives to testimony the faith, to not leave their people, but to serve them till the last breath, taking care of the person, every person, on both the spiritual and humanitarian fronts. On the humanitarian front, our battle is non-stop against famine. We provide and distribute food packages monthly to more than 2,000 of families. We fight against sickness by helping ill ones from all sectors, those suffering from all kinds of illness and diseases, burdened with the financial expenses of their medicines, doctor visits, and surgical operations. Our battle is everlasting to rebuild Aleppo, as from 2016 until today, we have been able, with the help of a team of engineers and a large number of workers, rebuild 1,250 houses damaged by the bombardment. And the work is ongoing. As well, we are providing employment opportunities for more than 500 people who had lost their means of work and who, in spite of their experience and will to work could not stand on their feet without our intervention. For the children, our battle is everlasting. We provide diapers for newborns and clothes in summer and winter. We provide medicine and education. In this area, our battle is everlasting to affirm what we declare in our faith, that hope exists in every human being, and that every child, however wounded, physically, psychologically, and spiritually, can be restored with our intellectual, physical, and psychological intervention by supporting after-school centers and by the arts, music, sports, and every other method available. During the years of the crisis and until today, we have carried out more than 50 programs covering most of the needs on two essential fronts: relief, food, drink and medicine, and reconstruction, from houses to jobs, arriving to human reform, especially children and people with special needs. In our orientations, we give priority to the new families who were married from 2010 till today. We have covered their physical needs for food and clothing, medical coverage, especially with regard to pregnancy and its follow-up, and covering the costs of births and following ups after birth. We didn't exclude from that support the engaged couples whom we still support today through a special project to encourage them to get married and build holy families. The selflessness of our work has impressed and attracted a lot of people who have generously joined as volunteers in this emergency and reconstruction service. One of the most beautiful characteristics of our mission was that our service was directed not only to our Christians from our Latin Rite, but to all the Christians from all the different churches in Aleppo, and not only to Christians, but also to Muslims. Salvation fulfilled by the someone. What the people saw was a Franciscan friar wearing the brown habit serving them. But what I saw was the someone, Jesus, who was always present in the middle of the rubble, in the middle of the weeping and whimpering. This person has the power of the divine wind, who was sweeping over the waters in the beginning to create and put everything in order. He is the person who was present with the three men in the furnace of Babylon that was heated 7 times more than usual. Because of him, the fire is no way touched them or caused them pain or harm. Then these three in the furnace with one voice sang, glorifying and blessing God. Daniel, the 3rd chapter. What we have achieved in our mission as Franciscan friars in the Middle East, in all of Syria, and especially in Aleppo, is in reality salvation. Until today, many related this work to that person wearing that brown habit. And I keep explaining to them that there is someone who was given to us, the Son. It is only through him that a humble disciple of his can start from nothing. For me, my participation is simple and deep in the same time. It comes through my faith in his vocation, his presence and his work, a faith that was translated into total readiness to go with him wherever he wants, letting him work through me. God is faithful to his covenant. God gave me many brothers, St. Francis. In everything we have done, we are most convinced that it is the work of the Spirit of God, the Spirit of love. Because of this Spirit, we are encouraged to give even ourselves for this mission. In this battle's field, we are not alone. The crisis has revealed to us many brothers and sisters from all around the world, from believers and good-willed people who, even though we did not know their faces, we have experienced their practical love to us. They too have responded to the inspirations of the Holy Spirit and become real partners of the mission of the Church, the Franciscan mission in Aleppo. They manifest for us God's faithfulness, who is present always at our side, accompanying us with all his providence. God will not abandon us. Once a family of parents and 2 children came and asked me, "Father, we are working day and night, but we can gain only half of the kitchen expenses of our family. We don't progress in anything, and we don't see a future for us in our country. Perhaps we have committed a mistake in remaining here. Perhaps we should have decided to immigrate years ago." I answered them by telling that we are still living the hard winter. For a tree in this season, we should not expect fruits or a progress in its growing up, but only the resistance to the hard wind, the cold, and all the storms. I told them not to worry if economically speaking, they could not stand up without a slightest progress. What is important for this period of difficulty is that they conserve the faith that gives you another point of view to the reality in which you find yourself. With the perseverance in the faith, a way in the desert will be always open for you. In fact, in all these past years of the crisis, we didn't have progress, but we didn't experience regress either. We didn't pass a day without something to eat. We thirst, but we haven't died from lack of water. As Christmas gift from the church, 1,000 children took 6 pieces, every one of clothes, and all the families received the money to buy 200 liters of heating oil. All were miracles that even as a church we didn't expect to happen. I told them also that according to my short life experience and the long experience of the church history, the moment of the storm, of difficulties, is the most fruitful because in it God intervenes, manifesting himself with all his power. We don't see any future for us, Christians of the Middle East or Syrian citizens, but we put our hope in him. For us, as we sing in a hymn from the Advent period, Jesus is the hope of the nations. He is our hope. The plant of the church was and is still always blooming during the tempests and storm of all the past centuries. In fact, one of the characteristics of this plant is to give flowers in the tempests and during the hard storms. The worst periods of persecution and of resistance to the faith were and still are the most fruitful moments in which the church can grow. Message of hope and thanks. Dear friends, I know that even in the United States, you can have different long and hard winters. Perhaps you see the high waves of the lack of Tiberias that are so strong, and you begin to think that the boat is in a great danger. Remember that we have always not something to start from, but someone to start with. Enter a church and look to the altar, who is presenting the heart of every one of us, the living altar, and remember that this someone is faithful. He is upholding his part, but he is waiting on yours and mine. I want to offer special thanks to all our friends and benefactors. Thanks to everyone who has prayed for us. Thanks also to everyone who, with sacrifices, is sending us something to start from in order to help our poor brothers and sisters. We have done a lot in these past years until today, but we have many more challenges and countless needs to face in the foreseeable future. That is why, while we thank God and our beloved friends, we ask our partners in the spirit of love to understand the depth and the continuity of the crisis in our country. With them, we can still do much more for the good of the people. I don't have much more to say, but I wish to repeat my thanks to all the organizers of New York Encounter for this opportunity. I regret again that I was unable to be with you in person, but what is giving me more consolation is the spirit of communion, who is unifying us even when we are far the one from the others. This spirit of communion is making of all of us around the world one body and one soul. I would like to finish with the words of St. Paul to the Hebrews that could fit for you and for us. With so many witnesses in a great cloud all around us, we too then should throw off everything that weighs us down and the sin that clings so closely, and with the perseverance keep running in the race which lies ahead of us. Let us keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, who leads us in our faith and bring it to protection. Hebrews 12. This Jesus, in fact, is the someone given to us, someone to start from. May God bless this encounter of 2019, so it may be throughout all the speeches and activities a beautiful and effective means to share hope, faith and beauty. May all the participants enjoy it and be filled with all joy and peace. May all of them go out after the end of the event of friendship enriched with something or someone to start from, to change all our world and all our reality for us and for everyone around us in a kingdom of heaven.